Can we have an accurate presentation, an accurate description, an accurate revelation of who Messiah is if we're divorced from the so-called Old Testament, or better called the Tanakh, specifically the Torah? What if we were to take all those pages out and say, well, that's just all done away with, but we have a revelation of Messiah? Do we really have an accurate revelation, Barry? Or is it possible for us to have something that's more of a golden calf?
Can Messiah be a gold calf? Or our version of him?
Yes. Can our version of Messiah, we're going to be coming to, we're through these Torah portions right now, in the midst of them, this week with the 10 words, and then very soon will be the very infamous Torah portion of the golden calf. And there will be many people that will use that as a way to point fingers at the Hebrews in the wilderness and how stupid they were, and why should you possibly do this? How could anybody ever possibly do something that ridiculous? But is it possible that in pointing the fingers, the judgment, instead of looking at them with mercy, compassion, which in the end the Almighty did, instead of looking at them with that mercy, we looked at them with judgment. And through that, have come to wrong revelations ourselves.
You're pointing out a very well camouflaged elephant in the room, and it's not just the church world; it's Hebraic roots community as well. We left institutions where we were once at because we had questions that were not answered or passed off, and we saw things in Scripture that just did not equal what was being preached, etc. We had our issues, and then we came out of those institutions, finding other people of like mind, or even being isolated to our own selves, studying on our own. The problem that has been created in that, Mike, is that many folks don't have good study skills. I mean, they have a passion for the Word, they read the Word, but without a good method of study, you can easily take a verse out of context, and it's been done a kabillion times, where you read something and without.
A lot, by the way.
I'm sorry.
Kabillion is quite a few.
That's a lot. Yeah. You take the verse, and without the context, and without a historical understanding of what may be being referenced, reading a verse in the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament, without the Tanakh or Old Testament foundation of understanding, you can go off on a road that really is out of balance and find yourself in a place where you're in error. It happens. It's happened forever, constantly. That being said, you ask the question, can we know the Messiah, the genuine Messiah, without the Tanakh, without the Torah in particular? And the answer is no. If your reality of who Messiah is begins in Matthew, you're going to know a similitude, perhaps, of who he is. But you're not going to catch the genuine reality of him without an understanding of who Moshe and the prophets say that he is. The the writings that give us doctrine do not begin in Matthew. If all of our quote unquote our doctrine for belief and practice is, as the church calls it, the New Testament, we're missing the balance of Scripture, because those doctrines have to have a foundation somewhere. If I start in Matthew, and that's where my reality of who Messiah is, then he stands up out of thin air.
Mm-hmm.
Who are these people that he came to? How is it that they went from being the covenant people that are the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and you find them in Matthew? Why did they need a redeemer? Well, everybody's lost it. Nobody's saved. Mm-hmm. Well, what happened to all the people that were in existence prior to Yeshua's appearance? Were they saved? Were they born again? What is their real? Well, I don't worry about them. Well, I'm a New Testament believer. You can't do that. You cannot. You cannot have a balance of understanding of what Matthew through Revelation is saying, and the Messiah who stands up in those pages without understanding everything previous. We have made a gross error, Mike, in my opinion. And all those years when I was pastoring, I did what had been exemplified and modeled before me. Someone would get in an altar of prayer and be born again. I mean, it was a genuine moment. They didn't know who Yeshua was. They didn't understand the name Yeshua. They called on Jesus because that was the only thing that I was preaching. It's the only thing I knew. But they were changed. They get up out of the altar, and what does this wise pastor do but tell them, here's a Bible, go read the book of John.
Yeah.
In the King James English. Not only is it hard to read, but John, Yochanan, is one of the most profound, sod level writings in the entire account of scriptures. So I'm asking them as a kindergartner to go study trigonometry without taking them to the first book of the Bible, start in Genesis, and read the story and think about people being redeemed. How simple that. Start at the beginning. No, let's go all the way to a collegiate course and start there. And we wonder why people get confused and don't understand. But we think, they're going to read John 3:16 and they're going to be amazed. And that's all we're thinking about. There's so much more to the book and such incredible depth of understanding there. And they're not going to get any of it unless they go to the other part first.
Oh, you begin with, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Elohim. The Word was Elohim. And that is totally meaningless to a person that doesn't understand what the word means. So, and this is something that's preached, and it's raising its head once again, that somehow we don't need all that. It's not that they're not saying, well, it's done away with. Now it's kind of like, well, we just need to change our focus a little bit. Well, let me go to some words of Shaul, okay? And I'm going to throw in, but Paul said, okay? In 2 Thessalonians, to lay out how important it is for us to not divorce ourselves from the message of the Torah, of the Tanakh, which is the foundation for knowing the true Messiah, instead of being led out into a golden calf Messiah. Let me read the words of Shaul in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 9. Well, now I'm going to go back. Don't you remember that when I was still with you, verse 5, I used to tell you these things, and now you know what is restraining, so that he may be revealed in his own time. Here it is, verse 7. For already this separating from Torah is at work secretly, but it will be secretly only until he who is restraining is out of the way. Then the one who embodies separation from Torah will be revealed, the one whom Adonai Yeshua will slay with the breath of his mouth and destroy by the glory of his coming. Anyone that says that we should separate ourselves in any way from the Torah is following the spirit of the anti-Messiah.
Wow. Now that, I mean, I 100% agree, but wow. What a declarative statement that is absolutely the truth. You want to say that again?
Anyone that declares in any way that we should separate ourselves, divorce ourselves, or just kind of change our focus from the Torah, that it's not really as important as what we've been saying it is following the spirit of the anti-Messiah, according to these words that I just read.
What Paul said.
But Paul's, yes. And why is this? Because how many times have I quoted this verse? Psalm 40, verse 7. Behold, I am coming, in the scroll of the book it is written of me. When Psalm 40, verse 7 was written, there was no Gospels. Wasn't there. The revelation of the Messiah, which is a progressive revelation, yes. So I believe that Noah knew more about the Messiah than maybe Adam did. Abraham knew more. It is a progressive revelation, yes, moving forward, just as the word covenant, as I spoke last week in Columbia, South Carolina, the word covenant is a progressive revelation. We do not have different covenants in Scripture. We only have one covenant, but each time that we see the word brought forth, it's a greater revelation. And so we have a progressive revelation regarding the Messiah, which will culminate in the second coming, when we will all see him as he is and not through a glass darkly.
Okay.
Until then, if we take out the words of the foundation, it's like kicking his feet out from under him.
Mike, the people may have started watching my 10-minute Torah videos or these videos that you and I are doing, and have a familiarity of who I am and what I may have said about myself for 5-6 years or so. But I don't know that they know me. Now, you and I have been friends since before 2000.
Yeah.
And we spent a lot of hours driving on the road or in each other's homes and on the phone, etc. So I have told you things about myself and my personal history that is not common knowledge. You know me a lot better than anyone who may have seen me on social media or a video format, etc. Without knowing my history, my childhood, the particular way that I was raised and my home environment and all those kinds of things, you may know me to a level, but you don't know me.
Mm-hmm.
The same is with Yeshua. Unless we know his history, we don't know him. Yeshua says, before Abraham was, I am. He was pre-existent to the patriarchs. He is pre-existent before all things. There is an ancient history of Yeshua. We need to see him as the one who is in the beginning, Bereshit 1. We need to understand him as the Aleph Tah. We need to understand him as the Et Haor. We need to see him as the light that is separate from the darkness. And that's just the first couple of verses. There's an ancient history of who Yeshua is that we don't know unless we study what is previous to what is commonly understood. Then when Yeshua appears and he begins to speak and we hear his words, Yochanan 1 says that the word became flesh. What word?
Yeah.
The ancient word. This one who is now flesh in front of us and is speaking to us and living and breathing right in front of our eyes is the ancient one who is pre-existent to all creation. We have no idea who this one is. When you begin to understand the overwhelming majesty and awesomeness of this one, he's more than just the physical man standing in front of us. Yeshua took Kepha, Yaakov, and Yochanan up on Mount Tabor and was transfigured before them, and the glory that was contained in him all along became revealed to the outside, and they fell to their face. They were overwhelmed. So they had no idea the level of glory that was contained within the physical man until he opened their eyes. Mike, two men walked with Yeshua for an extended period of time. We're not told how long this walk was, but in Luke 24, on the road to Emmaus, two men walked with the resurrected Messiah, and they were sad because of his passing. And then it says that, as in verse 28, as they approached the village where they were going, he seemed to be going on. They urged him, "Why don't you stay with us?" He had been walking with them, but they didn't know who he was until their eyes were opened. Can it be possible that you and I could be walking with Yeshua for years and not know who he is? I preached him for decades as the church taught me his identity. It was powerful. That identity of him cast out demons. People were born again. They were filled with the Ruach HaKodesh. Lives were changed. People rejoiced. People matured to some degree. I saw healings in that revelation of him. I laid hands on people, and I remember laying hands on it. I was just getting started in my ministry, but I laid hands on a man's leg, and I could feel a knot, a blood clot in his leg. And as I prayed, that thing released and moved, and it was gone. It instantly disappeared under my hand. I felt it when it left. I felt a fever and a sickness leave my body when my dad walked in my bedroom after I got married, laid his hand on my chest. He prayed a very simple prayer. I mean, it took 2 minutes or less. Mm-hmm. The fever broke. I jumped out of bed and I was fine. I know there was power in that revelation, but I also remember being on Ben Yehuda Street in Jerusalem and realizing that my Messiah is not only a Jew, but he's Jewish in his understanding and culture and language and being, and I didn't know who he was. Yeshua is more exciting to me now than Jesus ever was. My revelation has increased, but do I yet know him? Not yet.
No, I don't think we, when we get to that place, it's going to be like, how much of him do we not know? And how much did Abraham know him more than I do? How much did King David know about Messiah that I don't know today?
Yeah.
I remember having a conversation with someone, it's been quite a while ago, and we were talking about this whole thing, and this person observes Shabbat, eats kosher, all those things. And we were talking about the subject. I said, well, what about those prior to the death, prior to Matthew? He said there was no redemption in the Old Testament. I said, so you're telling me that all of these people are in your theology, going to hell? Yep. What do you say to something like that? It's beyond words for me to put something like that into anything that can be communicated, because I just don't, I can't see it that way. I believe that these patriarchs, the matriarchs, uh, they had a revelation of Messiah that was incredible. Because why? Maybe their revelation of Messiah was greater than ours in some ways, because they saw him in the Torah, in the Tanakh. Now, ours should be greater. I will give you that. Our revelation today should be greater than the revelation they had, because we have the Gospels, the apostolic writings. So we should be walking in a level that they never experienced, they never thought of. But yet we will never get to that level if we again divorce ourselves from the foundation in which they laid.
I'm still sitting here stunned at what you said, Mike, that no, other than, as Yeshua said, Yeshua himself and Yochanan the Immerser, John the Baptist, what greater prophet is there than Moshe? Isaiah described him, and he's lost.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you take this to its obvious conclusion, since Yochanan lost his head prior to the death and resurrection of Messiah, then Yochanan's lost too. Okay, people may be sitting out there going, okay, I'm tracking with you guys, or why are you even talking about this? Because these are things that are being taught today. And people are following this stuff by the droves. As a shepherd, you cannot just kind of act like this is not happening. It is happening. You and I have had all kinds of people go along different places. Okay, the revelation of Yeshua is something that we have to walk forward in, not back. And this is where the Hebrews in these Torah portions would continually want to go back to the garlic and the leeks and the cucumbers that were in Egypt. We've got to be a people that move forward, but we cannot move forward without the foundation that comes from our past.
There is no other foundation to build on other than Yeshua, as the entire word declares him to be. You mentioned that doctrine a few moments ago, Mike. It's the same thing that is happening in our culture right now. There is a retelling of history and a reevaluating of historical figures by modern boundaries and perceptions. You can't look at a historical figure and modern, what's the word I'm looking for? We're trying to evaluate the quality or the value of an ancient figure by modern concepts or modern boundaries. I'm failing to communicate here well. So if someone in an historical walk does not measure up to our worldview now, then they were a racist, or they were a bigot, or they were any long list of negative terms. We have to understand who they were in the accepted culture of that day.
And if you can
Right.
rewrite history, then you can rewrite the identity of the person and make them into something that they were not.
Correct. So people are look, for example, they look at George Washington because he had
Mhm.
slaves, he was a hideous man. No, he did some very valuable things in the establishment of this country. Slavery was an accepted social norm in that day. Now, did he mistreat those slaves? I don't know. I haven't read that record. I can't tell you. Um, but as horrible as, I'm sorry,
and we're not saying that it was right. Okay, it was what was.
it's what was. Now, would it be acceptable for someone to do the same today? No, we're against that. But that was culture then. And as far as what was acceptable and the norm then, that's what he lived. He wasn't living in our situation. The same thing can be said pertaining to doctrine. You can't create a doctrine today and then squeeze all the previous scriptures to fit your doctrine. And what you were describing, someone created a doctrine. And out of the creation of their own doctrine, then they make and they force all the scripture to fit that doctrine rather than saying, if I have a doctrine, it has to be in balance with the whole of scripture. And that's what we've done. You can't take the Tanakh alone and say, well, all doctrine is based on the Tanakh without an understanding of what Yeshua said about the Tanakh. There is a balance that has to be there. Not everyone that goes to Sunday church is an evil person. When we came out of the church, we were angry about the church doctrines, angry about church mechanics and organizations, etc. And in early days, we took every opportunity to light a bomb and throw it in their backyard. And we railed against what we came out of. We were wrong. And the Father had to wring a knot in me on several occasions and let me understand you've been angry long enough. If you don't have any joy, you don't have anything. You need to find out what you believe and be joyful about it. Not everybody who believes differently than me is wrong. We may just see something a different way.
Yeah.
There was a time that I vowed up and down, I will never go back inside a church door again. Well, I've had to learn and understand there are times that I need to be there. There are reasons to be there. And not everything taught and sung and practiced within church walls is wrong. Now, there may be some practices or some things said that I would disagree with, but it's not my privilege then to go off on a rant or to stand up and point my finger at a preacher in the middle of his sermon. Brother, you're wrong. You're preaching evil doctrine, etc. I'd be out of order. If I want to approach him later and say, can I discuss something you said? And have a conversation instead of an argument, I might get somewhere. Mike, we don't know Yeshua. Yeshua looked at people that were practicing a religious system and they knew that it was for their own profit, and he called them on it. But Yeshua had the authority to do so because he is the tabernacle, he is the word, he is the sacrifice, he is the offerings, he is all of those things. They are a revelation of him, and he stood up to those that were misrepresenting him and said, that's not me. You're not revealing me correctly, in so many words. And he called them on their self-serving system of religion. For you and I to do that, we better have some clout. We better have some authority. Rav Shaul dealt with a congregation in Corinth that was railing against him. Yeah, he's just he writes big letters, but when he shows up, there's there's no real authority. And in 2 Corinthians, he said, you better hope that when I get there, I don't have to demonstrate to you my
The
authority.
authority. Yeah. Authority will walk in.
So the Father worked with these first generation believers in Messiah with signs and miracles and wonders that confirmed and affirmed the word that they were preaching. And until you and I can absolutely lay hands on the sick and they miraculously recover, until people are having our shadow pass over them and they're healed, until it is demonstrated with great authority that we have the word of Elohim that we're speaking, we need to be careful how we approach people and how we deal with those with our authority and setting people straight. We have to know Yeshua, and Yeshua has to know us.
Mhm.
How many times we reference Matthew 7? It's not whether we think we know him. Does he know us? Has he walked with us long enough to open our eyes and reveal himself to us?
That word that was spoken by Shaul in English is the separating from Torah. Is that really where maybe we're talking about here is, well, let's separate ourselves from the Torah. Let's separate ourselves from the Tanakh. Let's separate ourselves from Israel. Let's separate ourselves from the Jewish people. Let's separate from this. How is that working out in our day? Instead of seeing this thing as a package, I mean, think about, I've taught probably as much as anyone on the tabernacle. You've sat through, endured to the end that teaching numerous times.
Multiple occasions.
There have been people who've said, well, I just don't see why you teach that, because you should be teaching about Yeshua. Barry, let me ask you a very pointed question here. When I teach about the tabernacle, do I ever mention Yeshua?
Only in every element that you're talking about, as how it reveals who he is.
Well, like, maybe in the curtains and in the altar and in even the stakes, and maybe like teaching the gospel there through the tabernacle, and then getting a greater revelation of the Messiah. Yeah. How someone can, it goes to this, that many people make statements on things they don't know anything about. I had a friend I was talking to recently that was in a meeting in which they were talking about anti-Semitism. And they gave as an example of anti-Semitism, put up on a screen two of Batya Wooten's books. And said, this is an example of anti-Semitism.
Well, did I understand you say they were saying that Batya Wooten is an anti-Semite?
Yeah. That her books are anti-Semitic, because they were teaching about two house, and the two house movement is anti-Semitic. Now, Miss Batya. I know Miss Batya fairly well. I don't know of anybody that's more pro coming together as a family. But the person was confronted about this and was asked, have you ever read the books? No. Oh, so you really don't know what is being said. You just repeated something that was heard. You heard. Yeah. How does that get, that doesn't get us anywhere, Barry. These men, possibly they were two of the disciples. They're walking on the road to Emmaus. We're talking about what we began last week. These men could have been two of the disciples. We're not told. But they knew about Yeshua. Here they're walking. Let's look at it here in a prophetic sense. They've turned their back on Jerusalem. They're walking away from Jerusalem. When you turn your back on Jerusalem, you're turning your back on the revelation of the Messiah to begin with.
Mm.
And no wonder they're in despair. Because when you turn your back on Jerusalem, you're turning your back on the coming kingdom. And when you turn your back on the coming kingdom, you lose hope. That's why they're walking in despair. And somewhere along the way, Yeshua walks along with them and begins to talk to them. And their heart, they knew something of truth was there. And then he opened their eyes, and he opened their eyes through the Tanakh. Is it possible for us to still have a revelation of Messiah in the Tanakh? And is it possible that unless we have that revelation from and when I say the Tanakh, I'm talking about the scriptures to the left of Matthew. Is it possible that if we had a revelation of Yeshua from the Tanakh, we would have a greater revelation of him from the Gospels?
Yes.
But the Gospels will never give you a greater revelation than what you have foundationally in the Tanakh?
You have to have both.
Yeah.
If I'm going to do advanced math, but all I understand is addition, I don't have any skills in subtraction or division or multiplication. All I understand is how to add. I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
If I can add and subtract, but I can't multiply and divide, I can't advance in my math skills until I learn what is more foundational. Now, to balance my checkbook, basic addition and subtraction is basically what I need. But there are other life skills that are necessary. I have to have more than that. I can, if I go through life saying, well, I can read and write, I can print my name and I can read it. That's not sufficient to operate in society. To say, well, I know what Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John say. Well and good. You know the revelation of Yeshua as presented on the earth in 33 and a half years. Do you understand the ancient revelation of him? Do you understand that he's the ark? Do you understand that he is the sling that was in the sword and the shield in David's hand? Do you understand that he's the cloud? Do you understand that he's the tabernacle? Do you understand that he's the rod of Moshe? Do you understand these things? No, I have no clue. Then you don't really know him yet. I'm not being critical and saying you can't know him. You can know Yeshua all you want to. If you have a basic revelation of him and you're satisfied and content with that, then that's all you'll have. I can know my wife as the lady who's in this house, or fond memories of her while we were courting and dating and so forth. The woman that she is becoming is still being revealed to me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, am I going to be satisfied with who I've known her to be? Or am I going to continue the journey as she continues to develop and be revealed and so on into our future? If I'm a wise Bubba at all, I'm going to hang on for the ride.
Yeah. I think you might have stepped into something that we need to come back to in another week. Hopefully Kathy will get that in just a second. Where is my wife? There she is. Maybe you stepped into something we need to go to. That a revelation of Yeshua in the Gospels gives us a revelation of the natural realm Messiah.
Okay.
It is the Tanakh that gave us the revelation of the spiritual realm Messiah. And until we understand the spiritual realm Messiah, we will have a very shallow revelation of the natural realm Messiah. The one who walked here, you must look at him from the spiritual realm that he came from in order to understand who he really is.
Well, stay tuned, folks. We're going to be on another week on the Emmaus Road here. And again, Mike asked the question earlier, and we'll finish with this. Why even go here? If the community of belief, as broad and many faceted as that is, was well founded, grounded in truth, and operating in the likeness of Messiah, these words would not be necessary.
Yeah.
Mike and I feel a responsibility, and an urgent responsibility, to cry out to this community of belief, because time is of the essence, and it's absolutely necessary that we stop our fighting, that we find our harmony, that we find reconciliation and restoration to the reality of Yeshua. We're not looking toward last days, we're in them.
Yeah.
Messiah's soon appearing. And you think, well, we may have, an extended period of time. Maybe.
Maybe not.
The reality is we don't have time to waste, because it's the united body of Messiah, the functioning body of Messiah, who has work to do after we get to that point. I don't want to see us barely reconciled, barely functioning just before trumpets sound and Yeshua appears in the clouds. Mike, we have things to accomplish, and it can't happen until we are functionally his body.
So true. All right. Well, hey, we'll see where this goes next week. Looking forward to it.
Shalom, everyone. Thank you for tuning in and watching Foundations for Life with Mike Clayton and myself, Barry Phillips. We'll see you again.
Shalom.
Next week.